Top 3 shoulder exercises for beginners.
Don't you want to look good naked?
When you're training your shoulders, you want to make sure that you're hitting all 3 areas of your delts. Delts is just another word for deltoid, which is just another word for your shoulders. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing exercises that hit our anterior, our medial, and our posterior delt. One of my favorite exercises for hitting your anterior, also known as your front delt, would be a seated dumbbell anterior press. With that, you want to make sure that the bench is set at a slight incline. And when you focus on pressing overhead, you want to make sure that your hands are just a little bit in front of you and that you're pressing overhead in more of a 45-degree-ish angle. This is a little bit different than a traditional seated overhead press that you may have seen before, where your hands are out at a 90-degree angle and very externally rotated. The issue with that is that that is going to cause, for some people, a little bit more impingement within the shoulder joint, and it's also not going to target your anterior delts as well as that anterior delt press. One of my favorite movements for targeting the medial or the lateral delt is going to be a behind the back cable lateral raise. So that's a mouthful, but it's a great movement because it's really good at lining up the cable and your arm path in the scapular plane. The scapular plane, all it is basically the plane that your shoulder blades are meant to move in. So it's 30 to 45 degree-ish angle out in front. So when you're raising your arms out, you might have heard, oh, when I'm doing a lateral raise, I should raise my arms out straight to the side. However, if we want to make sure that we're putting the medial delt in the most advantageous position to create as much tension through that muscle fiber as possible. That is really what we're doing when we're trying to train a specific muscle tissue, is putting it in the position where the fibers run to make sure that we can create as much tension through that in the best possible way. And using the cable for lateral raises is that you can manipulate where the exercise is the hardest by adjusting the height of the cable. So for example, if you had the cable at the lowest point on the cable stack, that would make the exercise pretty hard towards the top and the mid-range part of it, but not so hard at the bottom. However, if you moved that cable stack up to around your wrist height and you did the same movement, it would actually feel a lot harder right at the beginning of that movement, which is where you're in that more lengthened or stretched position of your medial delt. And then as you raise up, you'll notice that the tension starts to fall off at the top. So it's actually easier at the top. That's what's cool about the cable, is that you can manipulate the different heights of the cable to align different parts of the fiber and to create tension through different areas of that specific tissue, which is what's going to create the most muscle growth for you. And if you want to hit your rear delts, one of my favorite movements would be a cable rear delt row. So again, with the cables, I love cables. With the rear delt row, you would perform it in more of a 45-degree angle back. And the reason for that is because we know that our rear delts, the fibers, like I mentioned before, you want to try to line up the fiber of the muscle tissue you're trying to work with the pull of motion that you're performing. So with your rear delts or your posterior delts, they run more so at a 45-degree angle. So if we can pull and row back at that 45-degree angle, that's going to put that tissue, the muscle tissue, under the best conditions to create as much tension within that tissue as possible. So a little bit of a nuance here though is that everybody's structure is slightly different. So some people might be great pulling back in that 45-degree angle. Some people might need to be a little bit higher, a little bit lower to really feel that posterior delt shorten as much as possible. And when I say shorten, I mean just contract to its greatest degree. So with that cable rear delt row, just thinking of pulling your arms back in around a 45-degree-ish angle and squeezing your shoulder blades at the back, and basically just trying to get your arms as far back behind you as possible. And that's gonna be a great exercise to train your rear delts. So if you're looking to incorporate those movements, a good place to start would be something like 3 sets of maybe 8 to 12 reps within that range, and just progress from there. Start to add a little bit of weight to that as you go. Track your weights, track your reps. Also realize that specifically with movements that are targeting smaller muscle tissue, so those lateral raises, for example, you're not gonna be able to use a ton of weight. So when you go to the cable stack machine, you're probably not gonna get, over 15 pounds, to be completely honest. And it also depends on how that cable machine is set up. So I'd really focus on your technique, your form, how you're performing the movement, making sure that you're creating tension within that tissue. So time under tension, controlling the movement throughout. So not just flinging the weight up and dropping it, but controlled up and down, paying attention to the tempo of that. So those are some things that can help when you're performing these movements, and also just making sure that you are, again, tracking your weights and your reps and your sets so that you can continue to progress week over week.